Law School, Edward Cantu's focus is on issues of separation of power with a particular focus on the presidential powers under the Constitution. He's going to come up and speak for a minute, but I will tell you that he is going to educate you, because that's what he does. He's a professor and he educates you. And so please listen to him. He knows what he's talking about, and perhaps some of the violations or suspected violations of the Constitution may not be quite as what we think they are. Maybe they're actually something else. Either way, he knows a lot more about it than I do. Edward Cantu.
All right, well, that was a tough act to follow. I can definitely say that I probably will not be getting nearly as many warm applauses as she got. But nevertheless, I hope that I don't get too many tomatoes thrown at me. Oh, you can't lean in? Lean in, no pun intended, right? Lean in? Okay, all right. All right, am I okay now? All right, good. Just give me a few minutes. I'm sure I'll mess it up somehow. All right, so yeah, power is with the people, definitely true, and that's a huge part of the problem. Let me explain, hold on. By the way, President's Day is a day to celebrate presidents, right? I'm getting a vibe that some of you aren't feeling it, right? Am I good? All right, so one of the big points of remarks today is that the power being with the people is obviously the best way it should be, but louder, really? I've never had anybody tell me that before. All right, but one of the big problems is the fact that the people are largely at fault for the problems that we face now, and that includes all of us. We're not accepted from that. So obviously my remarks will not be as uplifting as some of the prior remarks, but I hope to add what I can as a law professor to bring a little bit more like dispassionate outlook on it. Not that there's anything wrong with passion. There's definitely not. All right, so let's imagine the scene that brought us here. A man who's the most powerful person in the world, who is theoretically constrained by the constraints of his power in Article 2 of the Constitution, nevertheless uses his power to make law, even though it's up to Congress only to make law and the executive to just enforce it. And this powerful person uses his power to make law by using executive orders that blatantly violate constitutional norms. This most powerful person in the world thinks that he has a mandate from the people to not only pragmatically bend the rules in order to get things done, but to do so in a haughty, showy way, as if breaking the rules is somehow a virtue, right? This most powerful person in the world asserts that any decisions of his that relates to foreign policy or national security are completely unreviewable by the judiciary, that he is entitled to absolute deference, regardless of whether those decisions impede on the constitutional right.
One second.
Oh, there we go. All right. Although I think it's only the left speaker that's working. Hello. All right, there we go. All right, so you might think in describing all these scenarios that I'm talking about Donald Trump, and I'm not. I'm talking about Franklin Roosevelt. I'm talking about Harry Truman, Ronald Reagan, Barack Obama, Bill Clinton, and yes, Donald Trump. Right? I told the organizers that as a con law professor, I'm more accustomed to informing rather than galvanizing. I'm more accustomed to at least attempting to provoke thought rather than throwing red meat. And yet the organizers still wanted me to speak because they told me that I would be speaking to basically like-minded people who, although you are passionate, you have that admirable Midwestern quality of being passionate while also grounded and measured and pretty humble. So that's... Now, for the minority that are looking for just red meat, I don't want to be a buzzkill, but I think I might. Don't get me wrong, I like a conscientious uprising just as much as the next guy, but
they tend to burn up fast when they glow too hot, okay? And so my remarks will hopefully kind of hew to the virtues of a more steady glow that illuminates but doesn't needlessly burn. All right, so I, like many of you, presumably all of you, I'm very good at reading a crowd. Presumably all of you have serious concerns about Donald Trump, all right? Now, I believe in only several weeks of his presidency, he has done things that are blatantly unconstitutional. And I believe that he represents a serious threat to our constitutional republic. Now, why do I believe this? Let me start by telling you some of the reasons why I don't believe this, or some of the reasons why, some of the things that don't inspire my conclusion, that may inspire some of you to conclude the same thing. So we may take very different paths to the same conclusion, and that matters. First of all, I don't think the executive order was a Muslim ban, either in practice or as a formal matter, all right? I don't believe that Donald Trump is ethically or legally required to release his tax returns. As a Hispanic person, I don't believe that Donald Trump is the modern George Wallace. For all the talk about how Donald Trump has inspired a resurgence of overt racism in our culture, I don't fear that the Ku Klux Klan next week is going to be running my local school board. Okay? Speaking as somebody who has literally been kicked out of stores because of the tone of his skin, okay, growing up in Texas, that happened, and other things. I have not feared that my safety is compromised because of my ethnic background more now than it was, say, 5 years ago. All right? Now, with an important aside that one group that can, I think, very legitimately claim an increased fear are Muslims. But other than that, that to me, that is not, despite a lot of the talk that goes on about the alleged increase in overt racism, to me, that's not my primary concern. And I do not accept that Donald Trump is not your president. He is your president. He was elected legitimately according to the process established in the Constitution for electing the president, okay? So, why then, at the end of the day, do I have such grave concerns about President Trump in the coming years? No doubt, I have concerns specifically about his temperament and his proclivities, but my main concerns stem from the nature of the office of the presidency itself. And I'm primarily here to emphasize that those who are interested in taking action need to care more about boring stuff. Right? They need to watch more C-SPAN. I'm not saying you all aren't educated, by the way. That's not what I meant. I just simply mean that both sides of the culture war have their echo chambers. And I have my echo chamber too because I tend to be more on the left than the right, okay? And I have to work hard to get out of that echo chamber in order to understand the weaknesses of my position and to understand what the real issues are. And sometimes those issues aren't intuitively appealing to us. They don't trigger our sense of social justice, but they're nevertheless systemically much more important. And that's the point that I want to make today. Okay, so it's particularly important for people to pay more attention to the boring stuff, especially when that's what it's particularly important when presidents do things that we like in the process of violating constraints on their formal power. All right, here's an example of what I'm talking about. You guys may not like this, but I'm going in. All right. So, for example, take Barack Obama's executive order, in which he exempted large swaths of people who are here illegally, immigrants who are here illegally, from the deportation laws. These are people that, under the relevant immigration statutes are supposed to be deported. Now, when he did that, okay, he was basically saying, look, I have a pen and a phone, and I'm choosing to not faithfully execute the law because I don't want to. Because Congress refuses to change the law in a way that I think is just, and therefore I'm going to change it using an executive order. Okay. Now, you might recall, rewinding back to 2008 in his campaign, somebody asked him at a rally, kind of like this one, what are you going to do to implement immigration reform? And Barack Obama, being a good former constitutional law professor, said, actually, that's up to Congress. The president doesn't have the power to do that. Fast forward a few years, and it's suddenly, I have a pen and a phone. Okay. So, I agree that, so how did progressives react to this? Did they react by saying, look, I agree with Barack Obama's politics here in a sense of social justice, but gosh darn it, that's a violation of the separation of powers, and therefore you can't do that? Of course not, right? This is hard to do, right? My grandparents on both sides were illegal immigrants. And because they illegally immigrated here, I'm able to stand before you today and enjoy the privileges of citizenship. So I tend to feel for these people that are technically deportable under immigration laws. But the fact is that I think there's a strong argument that Barack Obama was behaving blatantly unconstitutionally when he did that. There is a point to all of this. Trust me, I'm getting to it. All right, so, Oh, what's this? Oh, this is a protest. I thought things were supposed to move real slow and low key. No, when is the Barry Manilow starting to play? All right. So my point is this: righteousness about things that are accessible and intuitively important are a bit of a cop-out when they distort our view of what the real problem is. Now, some of those things that we're righteously indignant about are legitimate things. But the problem is that when they're not the main problem, then they tend to distract us in a very dangerous way. Okay, so the point that I want to drive home to you today is this. People like action. They like when executors get things done. That's true for liberals and conservatives. Over the past 100 years, we've seen a steady increase in presidential power that both liberals and conservatives have invited because in the moment, that particular group likes what the president is doing. Donald Trump and all the problems that he presents now is an expression of our decision over the past 100 years as the people to allow this to happen. If you're really concerned about the systemic damage that Donald Trump can do to this country, you should be concerned about the degree to which we have let our guard down and not insisted that people in government respect the formal limits of their power. Is that a little bit more to the point? I put down the notes and just start riffing. It works pretty well. But by that, what I mean is not just a focus on the sexy things. It's not just a focus on abortion or race issues, even though those are important things, reproductive rights, all of that's important stuff. But we have the systemic stuff. If we want politics, if we want our system of government to be something more than just a war between ideologies, then we have to accept the fact that we lose sometimes. We have to accept the fact that the systemic integrity in our system of government that in the long run protects us sometimes is very inconvenient. Sometimes it means that we end up having people appointed to the Supreme Court that don't share our politics, but that are nevertheless extremely qualified. And that we shouldn't be calling our senators to filibuster them simply because they're not liberals. Right? So, my point is that people need to care much more about stuff that doesn't stoke our visceral sense of right and wrong, of social justice. And until that happens, all we will see in this country are culture wars that have no end. So I encourage you to consider the degree to which you and me and everybody else for that matter might care a little bit more about the stuff that we learned in civics class that's kind of dry. Stuff about states' rights, the separation of powers, the way the framers of our Constitution sought to disperse power so that it couldn't be too concentrated and be abused by people with bad or even often good intentions. All right? That's the primary takeaway. We've come a long way from the framers' vision of an executive that is humble and tame. The executive, the presidency that they envisioned was a very humble one. The executive would have just enough power to be effective, but not too much to threaten liberty. Now the president, through executive orders, both Democrats and Republicans, can effectively make law without any say from Congress. That's dangerous. So I encourage you all, in the midst of your admirable passion of caring about all these discrete issues, to also think about the systemic problems that have given rise to them, and think about how we might be a part of the problem and a part of the solution as well. Thank you.
So there you are, students. That was a great lesson. Thank you, Edward. Coming up next, we have, do you guys want to do